Okay, good morning on this frigid cold Wednesday. I'm going to record today's session just so that we can stay on track. Some of the material that we would do today I'll push to next week, particularly talking about some more about the Summa readers, but let's get started. So, welcome back to spring, your last semester. You can probably see the light at the end of the tunnel, maybe, although based on past years, it gets a little cramped here in the finishing the thesis course, but we'll get everybody to the finish line. So today, excuse me, if we were going to be in class, I'd take your questions. If you have those, please post them to Canvas if they are general, and it's likely somebody else might have them. That way we can get those things taken care of and not wait a week. And if they are personal, just please write me an email. Let's talk a little bit about Summa readers right now. So if you are close in GPA to the cutoff for Summa, if you think you're going to be close, you should get a third reader. In fact, Honors is deciding going forward that everybody is going to have 3 readers, and that Summa is going to be judged on the basis of the quality of your thesis. And so in this class, we'll start to do that by requiring that a different score on the thesis rubric. But so if you're close, you should get a Summa reader. Ideally, these should be CBS people because we want this to go smoothly. This person's going to read the thesis entirely cold at the end of the term. They're going to have 2 weeks to read it. They're going to comment on it. And so we want people who understand what a CBS thesis is and isn't. So ideally not a clinical only person who isn't well normed with respect to what this should be. This person shouldn't be associated with your lab group in any way, or even in lab meetings with your group, a highly related next door neighbor lab where they do the same thing, study the same organism. That's probably not the most ideal Summa reader, but they can be a lot closer than your primary reader. Your primary reader serves as the content outsider. This person should be a faculty, so not a postdoc. So what I want you to do is to think about who a couple of good people might be for this and write me an email. And in that email, okay, listen, because it's not on the slide, I want your project title, your PI's name, so I don't have to go looking it up, your primary reader's name, so I don't have to go looking that up, and then a couple of names of people who might be good Summa readers. You'll email that to me, and then I'll email you back and tell you if it is or isn't okay to contact them. And then when you've got it firmed up, we can talk next week about refiling the UHP form and our own form to keep track of this information. Okay, so if you think you might be Summa eligible, give me an email with that information and a couple of options. And if you have questions about Summa readers that are general, again, post it to Canvas. Okay, we would also talk about the feedback that you got from your faculty meetings. We would revisit that. I will just read your reflections. Know that your revision of your thesis introduction after getting that feedback is due in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today, the day off day, on Wednesday. So you need to be moving on that part. We're going to talk a little bit about the timeline and off weeks. Off weeks when we don't have class, Jess and I are available to help. We can help with figures. We can help with various sorts of things. We can help with a poster. And we can do that either in the classroom or in another meeting room somewhere. or we can do it one-on-one, and because we're not all together, we'll talk about that next time in class. But know that we are available on those off weeks when you should be working on these materials, and we're happy to help you. Okay, and then in a little bit, we're going to talk about the poster work. You've got an assignment for next week, which is to develop and bring to class hard copies, two copies of hard copies of 2 to 3 figures and the associated text as they would appear on your poster. And so we're going to talk in a minute or two about how figures for the poster are different than figures for your thesis. If you were all together on your note card, I would ask these questions. How many thesis figures do you have polished with corresponding narrative? So that paragraph, that is those 5 or 6 sentences as we reviewed quite a bit in class. Are your materials and methods up to date? Because soon you're going to have those finished. You're going to be expected to have those finished and ready for your PI to provide feedback on. Do you have a document where, as you're writing your results narrative, you're putting discussion points that you think about as you're writing that? Oh, I need to talk about this. That thing is weird in this gel. I need to talk about that. Those ideas you want to capture and park somewhere so that when we talk in class about writing the last section of your thesis, the discussion, you have things to put in that. So we talked about that actually a bit in the fall when we were talking about the results narrative and how it stops short of discussion. So you should be putting those things somewhere. And basically, here on the next slide is last year's timeline. I didn't make a new one because we've done this through Canvas. You have all of this that is really well laid out. And I'll just use this to remind you that it's actually a fairly aggressive timeline in the spring. But remember that you all come into this process asynchronously. You have had different amounts of times in your lab. Some people just started this year. Some people started over the summer. Some have been in the same lab for years. So we always tell you, you can work faster. You can work on your thesis ahead of time, but you can't work slower than this. So this kind of timeline builds in enough space at the very end so that your thesis goes to readers for assessment, and then there is enough time to do some revisions if you get less than an acceptable score in any category. But you should be working on all these parts. And all of those materials that we developed for the fall semester are available to you, and you should really use them. So write the materials and methods like methods. Don't describe a particular experiment, describe the method. Some of you didn't do that properly in the fall, but go back and look at what the requirements were, how these sections are going to be judged, what the expectations are. Remember about the narrative. We'll talk about that in another minute here. And also, I think it's important to be thinking about citations. They're the evidence and support for your arguments. They occur mostly in the introduction and the discussion, a little bit in the results narrative, a little bit in the materials and methods, but choose wisely. And now is absolutely a time. Lots of consultation with your PI. So pick those wisely. And again, we want the whole document clear, concise, uncluttered English. You know who I'm talking about. Cohesive, sentences flow, logic overt from one sentence to another. So you should be working on all of these parts. We're going to have deadlines for parts that you should be working on. You can see, look ahead in the Canvas, and make those weekly meetings with your PI. You'll be so happy if you can get those set up. Or if you can't get a weekly meeting set up, then at least then go into the Canvas site, figure out when you have deliverables that you need to have talked to your PI about, and get those meetings set up now, because there's no wiggle room. There really are no extensions in the spring, because they just butt up on one another, and then your PI is going to be cranky. Okay, remember, narrative. This is the part that CBS honor students have some challenges with, and we don't want to open any of these documents and see undeveloped paragraphs associated with each of your pieces of results. These are not lab reports. So for each figure, you're going to emphasize and signal your results. You're going to describe your results, but you're going to tell the story first. So the section lead-in up at the top, expression cloning of this receptor, the opening to identify the receptor, non-binding strains were used as an affinity ligand, references to the approach, the experiments. This library was selectively enriched for cDNAs that confer binding. That's the experiment. Refer to the figures 1A through D, description of the results. 4 clones were identified, so do it in words. And then the conclusion, all 4 clones encoded the same molecule, HJAM, which suggests that that is a reovirus receptor. There's not a lot of discussion of the results. That's going to go for the discussion, but every single figure that you have should have this size paragraph with all of these components. Here's another one, and then I'll stop. Declarative lead-in, telling the fact. Logical, this one looks a little differently, uses a setup as the logical hypothesis. If this is true, then this should also be true. Then to test this prediction, that describes the question, the experiment. There are some experimental details there. That's the approach. Refer to the figure 3A. Describe what the reader should see in the results. As expected, this grew efficiently. In contrast, yields of this other thing were tenfold greater in these cells than these cells. So you can use numbers to make your point. That's what you're expecting your reader to see. Oh, a tenfold, a 1 log difference. That's big, right? And then a conclusion, this result indicates that, and then that's the end of that results narrative module. There's some good language in these 2 examples. There's more if you go back into the PowerPoint from the fall. Good language, look at tense. Remember, when you describe experiments that were done in the past, it's the past tense. When you're making a claim, then it's the present tense. If this thing functions, then this should do this. This result indicates that these cells rescue. They still do. So tense is used in scientific writing in a particular way. Okay, again, if you have questions or concerns about any of this material or anything else that is likely to be shared, post it to Canvas. Summa readers, if you think you might be Summa eligible, send me an email with all the information we just discussed, your situation, who else is reading for you, and some ideas, and I can give you the thumbs up. And then the timeline we talked about. Okay, so now we're going to move on and we're going to do a little bit of discussion about what you need to develop for next week, because you need to be working on figures that are parallel, some figures that are parallel to what's going into your thesis, some figures that might be new for the poster, and figures that are related to the ones in your thesis that are developed particularly for the poster. And so what we want next time is 2 to 3 of those. You'll workshop those in your small groups, and you'll also turn in one set of hard copies to me because it's easier for this than clicking through all of your work, so I can provide a little feedback. Okay, so think about the fact that when you give your poster, it's only going to be up when you're there. You are the narrator. You are leading your visitor through the story. And think about how long they are going to be at your poster at the Europe Symposium. If you are lucky and it's one of your readers or somebody who really knows you, they might stay for 15 minutes. But they're not going to stay for much longer than that because the poster session is short and they've got other students to visit too, right? Some people might even stay for less. So think about how you want to develop versions of your thesis figures and streamlined text so that the poster supports you. So I'm going to show you a couple of snippets of posters from past years, some from quite a while ago, and talk through sort of things to do and things not to do. And we'll use some other posters from more recently for sessions in this semester that are upcoming to talk about good poster practices and things that you can potentially try. But this is a mixed bag of sort of things that are less good and things that are good. Here we go. Okay, this one. What, if you were in front of me, I'd ask, what did this person do? And you might say, this person copied and pasted thesis material and just put it on the poster. And you would be right, I think. These are thesis figures and thesis-related text. And nobody is going to read this. This poster would make me probably choose to go to some other poster to talk to somebody because the figures are small, there's all of these words, and it's distracting. So you want to not do this. You want to think about making versions of your material that are going to be really effective at supporting you as you tell your story. So here's, so this one that we're looking at now is from quite a few years ago. We didn't teach this that well. And so here's one from, I think, maybe 2 years ago. And you can see it's just a lot cleaner. Okay, here's another one that seems more like a cut and paste. So there are lots of small figures, lots of text in the figure legend. So it's not really using space well, and you don't need to do this. What I like on this one is the diagram over in the far right hand column that sort of helps draw the conclusion, but nobody is going to read these words. So don't do it. Write the words, put them in your thesis. This works well in print. What works well in print doesn't work well on a poster. So think about making versions of a couple of your thesis figures for a story to tell on your poster. And I want 2 or 3 of them for next week, hard copy, one for me and one to be workshopped by your classmates. Here's the last slide before we wrap up here. Here's another example of somebody who went the minimalist text route, which is what we're aiming for. This person used their real estate to really use images so that they could talk through the background. This is pretty effective. I'd go and listen to this person talk about this replication fork. Very minimal legend here. So there's clear background, then there's a methods block. Again, easy to talk through approach. Nobody is going to read all those words that you saw on the last poster. I really hope we don't get posters this year that are just cut and paste text from your thesis, because it's not effective for a poster session like the Europe one that you're going to go to. And then on the right-hand side up at the top, there's a results block. And this individual chose 4 pieces of data to present. That's probably a good amount. They used color, which they're not going to use in the thesis, really, usually, with declarative titles and minimal legends, and then conclusions, again, images made by the student, and then references and acknowledgments. So I think just think about these sorts of ideas. So what I want from you for next Wednesday is a couple of figures, not many, many little panels, just, like this one has 4 pieces of results. Show me 2 of those, or show me 1 of those and a diagram for your background or your methods. But we're going to say draft, but at this point in the semester, don't lowball this, because there's not that much time. You're going to make everything this semester as good as it can possibly be. Put the time in now, because things are going to sort of pile up in a couple of weeks. So if you can actually get something done that's really well on its way for the methods, for a methods description or a background or a model, do that. Okay. Again, questions, post them to the Canvas site. So before you go, you are already gone. I'm sitting in my kitchen. Check in with your readers and your PI about the timeline for the semester. You can see on the Canvas site when the thesis is going to go to them. And they're going to have 2 weeks to read. So make sure that they know when that is and that they're going to be in town. If they're not, we've done this asynchronously in the past, and I have communicated with the PI and signed the forms. Everything is doable, but better to know about it ahead of time than to be surprised. And remember, one reason that I want to know who you're thinking about for your Summa readers is because I have the list of all of the people who are already reading for primary readers and who may also be a PI. And so I can make sure that you don't ask somebody who's already doing way too much and would not be able to do a good job within that 2-week period. Again, I recommend that you make regular meetings with your PI. I know it's hard to ask sometimes, but it may be better to ask than to have to keep asking regularly and then have things get messed up. And again, 2 hard copies of 2 to 3 draft figures with the accompanying text for your poster for next week. All right, stay warm. Post, please, to Canvas if you have questions about any of this, and I'll see you all next week. I wouldn't be afraid to go up to this one because in the middle I can see some data. Looks like there are 3 experiments. I would love to talk to this person about that. There's a figure at the beginning on the left-hand side that supports their introduction of the subject. This student chose to use the abstract from his or her thesis probably as the starting material for the background. Too many words, but it's fine. You could definitely do that. Or you could put that background, you could cull out some of the flow and put it into some bullet points that might support you. But this student could use that figure up in the background block um, to talk me through, what the biological problem is. What is the gap in knowledge? Down beneath that, instead of copying and pasting paragraphs from the materials and methods that nobody is going to read, this person made a sort of flow chart of the experimental approach, and and 3 bullet points, 3 points with respect to the methods, and this would be an appropriate. We could be standing by this, and the student would sort of talk us through what the approach was. Um, that figure down there probably wouldn't go in the thesis. That figure was probably developed particularly for the poster, and you should feel free to do that. And you could do that for next week if you think that that would be helpful. Then the middle column has really 3 experiments. Think about the amount of time that somebody is going to be there. You don't need to put every figure that you did and that is in your thesis on your poster. You need to tell a story. And so there shouldn't be so much stuff on the poster that it is off-putting. This individual used color that might not be in the thesis, probably isn't. And the labels are really clear and clean. There's not lingo there. They are accessible. Things don't have like little legends, Excel legends up in the corner that make it hard to understand. You have to keep going back and forth between the legend and the figure to figure out what the blue line means. It's all right there, under the bar graphs. You can really figure out what it is. So this is a really good approach. See also that these have titles, sort of in the blocks with the data, which is not how you're going to do your thesis. In your thesis, the title is going to be next to figure 1 in the legend, for example. And the figure legends here are absolutely minimal because you're taking somebody through this. So just what is necessary, not what you have in your figure legend in the thesis. So this is really, I think, quite well done. There's some bullet points for conclusions, some bullet points for future directions, and then a references block, which is not necessary at all. But fine if you want to do it. But think about the real estate on the poster. You don't necessarily need it. Okay, so I think that there are lots of things to get that are good from looking at this and thinking about what you might do.